Welcome, everyone. This webinar is organized by Swords to Plowshares and is designed for the grantees of the California Women Veteran Project to gain a cultural understanding of the women veterans they plan to serve through the grant. Issues stemming from military service are often the primary causal factors for veteran homelessness. There may also be significant economic factors at play. The VA has a mission to eliminate homelessness among veterans by 2015. And there has been a surge of programs and resources devoted to this effort, which behavioral health providers working with veterans should know about. Leon Winston, Chief Operating Officer at Swords to Plowshares, will cover the major initiatives to end homelessness and the progress that's been made. Leon has worked on the housing, treatment, and income support needs of homeless and low-income veterans since 1995. Referred by the San Francisco VA Medical Center, he came to Swords as a client in 1993 and is a graduate of our transitional housing program. Leon earned a Master of Nonprofit Administration, Organizational Development, and Bachelor of Public Administration degrees from the University of San Francisco and his certification in Alcohol and Drug Abuse Studies from the University of California at Berkeley. He serves on the Board of Directors of the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans, and he is an honorably discharged veteran of the U.S. Navy. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. During this webinar, you may type a question to Leon or Swords to Plowshares staff at any time. Simply type your question in the questions box on the right side of this webinar's display. At the end of the presentation, we will review the questions and comments posted. All participants will be given a chance to ask a question of Leon virtually by raising your hand when clicking on the small hand icon under the list of attendees next to your name. Without further delay, please welcome Leon Winston.
Well, thank you, Kelly, and good morning. Could you advance the slide, please? Well, we're going to talk briefly about the veteran population, particularly the homeless veteran population and risk factors for homelessness, and then we'll follow up with an overview of the main services being put forth largely by the VA and HUD in service of the mission of ending veteran homelessness. Next slide, please. Just a little, these numbers, the slide you're seeing here came from, I believe, the 2013 point-in-time count, which would have been conducted in January of that year. It showed that on one given night, there were close to 58,000 homeless veterans in this country. 12% of the adult homeless population that are veterans. Now, once again, this is a point-in-time count, so it is by nature underrepresentation. They don't count all veterans. You could probably put a multiplier of 1.3, 1.4 on that to get a more accurate number. In California, we have the distinction of having the largest population of homeless vets in the country and the highest overrepresentation of homeless veterans. That same point in time count showed that there were just over 15,000 homeless vets in California. Texas, Florida, and New York are the next three in size, and with that distinction of the highest homeless veteran populations in the country. Next slide, please. Recently, the VA and HUD and the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness started looking more closely at the continuums of care rather than statewide or VA medical center catchment areas to determine the number of veterans there. As this slide shows, Los Angeles far and away has the largest number of homeless vets in the country and also the largest number of unsheltered homeless vets in the country. And San Diego is the next largest. San Jose, Santa Clara, and San Francisco are also notable in the number of homeless vets. And Alameda, and elsewhere in California, Alameda County and Riverside, San Bernardino also have very notable numbers of, particularly of unsheltered homeless vets. Next slide, please. So who are the homeless veterans? Well, the majority are single, 92% are male, the vast majority are in urban areas. The rural areas do create a challenge for targeting resources there, for doing accurate point-in-time counts, and so that they should not be ignored. But to get the greatest bang for the buck, the VA and HUD and USICH are looking at urban areas. The majority suffer from mental illness, substance abuse disorders, co-occurring disorders. 27% have trimorbidity, which would be mental health, physical illness, and substance abuse. Minorities are overrepresented significantly in the homeless veteran population, as they are in the homeless population in general. Roughly 40% are African American or Hispanic. I think the vast majority of those are African American, and nearly half served during the Vietnam era. Homeless veterans are also homeless longer than non-veteran homeless, nearly 6 years versus 4 years. And homeless vets are also significantly older than non-veteran homeless, over 20% or over 60, compared to under 10% for non-veteran homelessness. So it's a significant problem. It has been, and we're making some progress, but there's a lot of work to do. Next slide, please. Women veterans are certainly a growing segment of the homeless veteran population, as they are a growing segment of active duty military and veterans in general. And as you, I'm sure, are all well aware, they have significant challenges. Women veterans are twice as likely to be homeless as non-veteran women. As it says here, a disproportionately high number of homeless veterans have a history of military sexual trauma. That is significantly higher than stably housed women veterans. And a note also is the relationship between poverty and homelessness among the veteran population. Female veterans living in poverty are 3 times as likely to become homeless than are non-veteran females living in poverty. This is also true for male veterans, who are about twice as likely to be homeless living in poverty as non-veteran males. Next slide, please. So what are the risk factors? Well, certainly military service is one, and is key to a lot of the troubles, readjustment issues that veterans face, combat exposure, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and military sexual trauma. There's also factor of who ends up in the military. It can be an economic draft, as some have called it. So people with fewer resources, fewer familiar resources, end up often going into the military as they see as a viable option as young adults, and so that can set them up for issues after being discharged from the service. And after service, those issues include criminal justice involvement, economic instability, and as mentioned, the overrepresentation of veteran homelessness among those living in poverty, and the lack of social supports, which can be also tied to military service. PTSD and isolation often go hand in hand, and depression, these sort of things. Next slide, please. Now let's talk to the VA mission to end homelessness. As was mentioned in Kelly's introduction, Secretary Shinseki announced in November 2009 a 5-year plan to end veteran homelessness by the end of 2015. Since that time, and this is once again based on the January 2013 point-in-time count, a 24% reduction in veteran homelessness was achieved based on that count. Now that's significant, but it certainly isn't sufficient enough of a progress in that period of time to accomplish a mission by 2015. And that 2015 date is being touted less and less as we see that it's going to take longer than that. For fiscal year 2014, the VA is dedicating $1.4 billion and specialized homeless programs, and $5.4 billion of that budget dedicated to health care for veterans who are homeless. The three main VA programs are VASH, it's Housing and Urban Development, Veterans Administration and Supportive Housing Program, the Grant Per Diem Program, and Support Services Veteran Families. Next slide, please. We'll start with HUD-VASH. HUD-VASH is, as was stated, it is cooperated with the VA and HUD. It's a program that has been around for quite a few years. It wasn't called a pilot, but it was such small size you might as well call it a pilot. There were just a couple thousand vouchers nationwide. I think the San Francisco VA had less than 40 of them, where social workers would identify veterans who they wanted to provide this housing subsidy to. And that's what we advocates were advocating for quite a number of years, that this program be expanded to actually start meeting the needs of vets, and that started happening in 2009, 2008. So it provides permanent housing for VA eligible vets who are single, or also those that are with families, and that's however the veteran defines family, which is a nice thing. That goes for the housing subsidy from HUD. That does not mean that those family members qualify for, or can get VA services. But the only exception to that, I think, would be there are some spouse services available at vet centers for combat veterans. Chronically homeless veterans are prioritized with a target of 65%. We advocates thought that that should have been much higher to begin with, but about 2 years ago, they acquiesced to pressure from advocates and from HUD and from folks that have been doing homeless work for a long time, that permanent supportive housing should really be targeted to those that are chronically homeless. But they are making exceptions for female vets and vets with children that don't need to make that meet that criteria. So that's still very much true. It's targeted for veterans with medical, mental health, or substance abuse disorders. They have to agree to VA case management for services. And it has secured permanent housing for over 60,000 vets since 2008. As mentioned, along with the focus on chronically homeless, the VA was convinced to adopt a housing first approach, which simply put is it's housing. We find you housing and you access services from that point, that not to put in any barriers to finding that housing, such as completing a treatment program, agreeing to be abstinent, that sort of thing, called housing readiness. Next slide, please. The Homeless Providers Grant Per Diem program has been around since the mid-1990s. The grant portion of that provides capital to providers. I think they'll pay up to 70% of the cost of construction of transitional housing or rehab of transitional housing. And the per diem portion is a payment mechanism that pays providers based upon bed days. So it's a rate that's tied to the state vet home rate. It's about $41 per day now. That the providers get reimbursed for providing this transitional housing with a length of stay of up to 24 months. They also fund a few service centers, not too many. The record keeping is a little onerous because you bill by the hour that the vet is in doing approved activities within a service center. So there aren't too many of those in existence. But they do offer, all of these programs offer an array of services. Some grant per diem programs are quite specialized. Many are modeled after residential drug and alcohol treatment rather strictly. Others, towards Plowshares, for example, we really target veterans with chronic mental illness and frail elderly. The VA refers to these as special needs populations. They also have special needs funding available for female veterans. And these are funds that you get paid over and above the per diem rate in order to provide the extra services that these specialized populations require to be successful. There are efforts right now to preserve the status quo eligibility for other than honorable discharge veterans and those that served for less than 2 years. For quite a long time, the VA has allowed them to come into grant per diem and other certain other homeless programs, but they stopped that a while ago. Then there was an outcry, and so they put a moratorium on their denial of service for those, so that as it stands right now, those veterans can be served in grant per diem. We'll see how long that lasts. There are approximately 20,000 GPD beds authorized through contracts nationwide. About 18,000 are operational at this point in time, last I heard. And this, I think, back in the mid-2000, that number was about 80,000. So it's seen a lot of growth in recent years. Next slide, please. In 2012, the VA started a pilot project for what's known as transition in place. This model is different. Rather than being having to transition out of your housing when you complete or graduate from the transitional housing program, the services leave and the housing stays. And it can be a bit trying, especially in markets like San Francisco and Los Angeles, to really do this in a way that is financially viable for providers. At last report, which was a couple of weeks ago, approximately 25 of these programs are operational across the country. Notably, a higher percent of female veterans are utilizing the transition in place as compared to the sort of the group living transitional programs, 16% compared to 6%. And the outcomes are slightly better compared to regular GPD. They're at about 71%, GPD is about 68%. Recently, the VA increased the target, along with HUD, for transitional housing completions into permanent housing to 80%. For many, many years for the VA, it was at 60%, and that's pretty much where they sat as far as efficacy for many programs. There are a number of programs across the country, including ours, that have been much higher than that. But that's sort of the status quo. And interestingly, some of you may know that transitional housing has sort of been out of favor by HUD for quite a number of years. You cannot get new transitional housing funding through HUD homeless programs as managed through continuums of care, and providers are encouraged to move their transitional housing funding into permanent housing rental subsidies. In some continuums of care, this has become a requirement. I believe that's true in Riverside at present. Next slide, please. The big new, relatively new intervention is the Support Services for Veterans Families program. Now, this was modeled after the HPRP, Homeless Prevention and Rehousing Program, that was part of the stimulus package that was nationwide. It varies a little bit, but what that program and this program have in common is short-term financial assistance that is targeted at rapidly rehousing those who become homeless and preventing homelessness for those who are at risk of becoming homeless through eviction prevention measures. It's a community-based grant program. This increased the number of community-based organizations that are receiving funding from the VA 20, 30, 40-fold. It was a huge increase in that, which created its own challenges for the VA. This is something that many of us in the community had advocated for a long time, that veteran services need to be community-based, not just hospital-based. And so this is a big advent in that. It's the only VA program that provides services to veterans and their families. Now, it provides short-term case management, financial assistance with rent arrears, for those that are at risk of homelessness, of child care, short-term legal services, and many other things that are eligible for this temporary financial assistance, and also short-term case management. The majority of the function is for rapidly to house homeless veterans, and it does use a housing first model. And it was, for 2014, it was authorized at $200 million a year. Now this compares to about what the grant per diem program is at. So it's a large new program for the VA. And that has increased, that authorization has increased temporarily to $500 million for the next 3 years starting October 1st of this year. Next slide, please. That increase in, well, here are the California recipients, which you'll see here. I would encourage all providers to work with those programs in your vicinity to help the veterans that you're working with to access permanent housing and to stay permanently housed. It's a very valuable tool, and it's been highly successful. The efficacy of the program has surprised everybody on how well it's worked, how well these veterans, who many would have referred to transitional housing settings or treatment, how well they're staying housed with just some short-term financial assistance. So the VA is getting a lot of bang for their buck with it, and I anticipate that this will be the cornerstone program for VA homeless and at-risk services going forward. Next slide, please. So this increase in funding from $200 million a year to $300 million a year, the VA is calling the surge. It's a word the federal government likes to use a lot in the last number of years, but it is a surge in funding. It targeted a number of communities that had the highest unsheltered percentage of homeless vets in the country. And what it did is it provides 3-year funding over and above the existing SSVF grant renewals, which will continue from that $200 million. And it's for 3 years only, and it's anywhere from $500,000 in some communities to millions available per year in Los Angeles. In San Francisco, it's an additional $200 million or $2 million a year for 3 years. In Alameda County, it's an additional $1 million a year. And this was very significant because this is the first time in history that the VA ever put part of their funding decision at the continuum of care level for the surge funding, and the surge funding only for your application to go forward, you had to have the endorsement of your local continuum of care. So this is the first time that continuum of care, which is really formed around HUD homeless programs, it has been since the mid-90s, the Clinton administration, to bring VA services and allocation of those services in the community to an actual community-based board. Of this additional $300 million, 32% of it, $96 million, has been targeted to California. Next slide, please. Print is small on this one again, but these are the California communities that were receiving this additional 3-year funding. Once again, this funding will not be renewed after 3 years. The intent and anticipation is that those funding levels will drop back down to $2 million, and so that those organizations who have existing SSVF funding for the last few years will continue at their pre-2014-15 levels. You see $24 million over 3 years in Los Angeles, and it goes down from there. Okay, next slide, please. The HVRP program is Department of Labor's Homeless Veteran Reintegration Program. It also has separate sort of adjunct programs targeting incarcerated veterans, female veterans, and veterans with dependents. Compared to other Department of Labor programs, it gives you a lot more latitude. It allows you to provide much more case management, ancillary needs such as tools or work clothes, uniforms, these sort of things that other DOL programs do not allow. And as I said here, it's a case management approach. It's focused on placement and training. It pays for job training. Unfortunately, in our opinion, it's been woefully underfunded. It's been authorized by Congress at $50 million a year for a number of years. The most that the Department of Labor has ever asked Congress for is a little over $38 million. So we're working hard to change that, both to increase the authorization and the ask. As it seems, given the very strong correlation between homelessness and poverty among veterans, it would seem like a no-brainer to some of us that we should really be working on these income support programs more than the Department of Labor is for this population. Next slide, please. This brings us back to California-specific funding. Prop 41, which passed with over 65% of the vote in this last election in June, is the Veterans Housing and Homelessness Prevention Bond Act of 2014. This, as approved by the voters, took $600 million of bonding authority that the California Department of Veterans Affairs had. They were sitting on about $1.1 billion of unused bonding authority that had been approved by the voters over the last number of years, and for a host of reasons, we're not making many home or farm loans, which these funds were limited to. Last year, I think the department only processed 83 loans with all this bonding authority. So working with the Speaker of the Assembly's office, John Perez, we helped draft legislation to change that, to repurpose $600 million of that $1.1 billion for the purpose of creating deeply affordable and permanent supportive housing for California's veterans. And amazingly, it passed both the Assembly and State Senate without a single no vote. It was placed on the ballot, signed by Governor Brown in October, placed on the ballot, and will become those funds will become available January 1st of this coming year. It's jointly administered by CalVet, California Housing and Community Development, and the California Housing Finance Agency, and it is pretty much restricted to capital funding. Right now, there's a stakeholder process going on where they're trying to decide how to really structure this. There are some things in it that we like a great deal here at Swords, some that we don't care for very much. A minimum of 30% of that $600 million needs to go to supportive housing. One thing that's in the stakeholder agreement is that for the supportive housing only, it can provide up to a 15-year operating subsidy. Now, while the impetus for that is understandable, that if you're going to be creating supportive housing, you really need some sort of subsidy to be able to operate those projects. Some of us feel that's very short-sighted. This is one-time money. It's not renewed through tax increment or anything. It's just one-time money, and this will take it will take a lot of new units offline, because for every dollar spent for the supportive housing subsidy will be $1 fewer for capital. And also because the nature of it is 15 years, the developers have after 15 years and 1 day are really out of luck. The subsidy needs to continue in some fashion. And folks in the know say that when the state has done this in other programs before, it has really created havoc for the developer or operator after that 15-year period. So we're speaking out in opposition to that. But they do anticipate the first note will be for $75 million, and they hope to have it out in November with funding decisions in early 2015. That $75 million first NOFA, they anticipate targeting only for permanent supportive housing or for supportive housing. Transitional housing is an allowable use of these funds. Once again, it is an allowable use of these funds. and then we anticipate that there will be additional notices of funding availability for non-supported affordable housing in the future. Many veteran service organizations, including Swords to Plowshares, are looking for new opportunities to create housing. This funding can really serve as sort of to fill the gap between traditional sources of funding, which were our tax credits and generally local sources. Next slide, please. Okay. You may have heard of the 25 Cities Initiative. This is a national effort. The VA launched in coordination with HUD and the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness to look at targeting 25 communities across the country that had high numbers of chronically homeless veterans, and to sort of recreate or establish a systems approach to working on that. It's also designed to target eventually all chronically homeless individuals in these cities. And the centerpiece of this is creating a vet registry and a coordinated assessment and referral protocol. In San Francisco, we'll be doing our, in mid-August, we will have our registry week where hopefully 100 or more volunteers will fan out across the city into the shelters and transitional housing programs and create a registry of all homeless vets here, including doing a brief triage with using a tool that's called the VI-SPDAT. That's the Vulnerability Index, Service Prioritization, and Decision Tool, which takes about 15 minutes. This VI-SPDAT, as it's called, assigns a score to based on the history as presented by the individual. It can be performed by non-clinicians after a brief training of about 15-20 minutes. And so it's very helpful in this way. And so the idea is that then these names with scores, unique identifiers, and scores are put into a database, and it matches those with highest need with the first available housing options that are available that meet their needs. And there's some opportunity for veteran choice in there as well. So San Francisco is one of these communities. Others in California are Fresno, Los Angeles, Riverside, and San Diego. So we're all working on that right now in these 5 communities in California. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. So in San Francisco, the methodology for this includes creating 100-day campaigns. These 100-day campaigns are something that that we've been working on for a couple of years now with the Interagency Council on Homelessness. HUD and the VA have supported it. The idea of these 100-day goals is to set a community-based goal that accomplish within 100 days. It's a stretch goal, so it's not easily accessible, achievable. It requires generally some sort of systems change in order to accomplish it, and then the idea is to then reinforce those systems changes going forward so you're more effective and efficient in addressing homelessness. So as mentioned, here in San Francisco, we're performing citywide outreach to create the veteran registry, triage every homeless veteran using the VI-SPDAT, and target the most vulnerable for the speediest placement into permanent supportive housing. We're also trying to utilize the 300 and some odd transitional housing beds, GPD beds mostly here in San Francisco, to create some bridge housing, short-term low barrier transitional housing to help facilitate moving vets from the street to permanent housing. And also a system to have homeless veterans document ready through efficient system-wide efforts. This includes getting their discharge paper, the DD-214, birth certificate, ID, anything that they need in order to successfully move into housing. Next slide, please. And finally, as far as these large efforts, there's the Mayoral Challenge. That's an initiative to end veteran homelessness by involving cities and, in some cases, states, and particularly the commitment from city mayors. This is being spearheaded by First Lady Michelle Obama and Jill Biden, and it's an outgrowth of an effort that was pretty highly publicized a number of months ago, where the mayors of Phoenix and Salt Lake City sort of challenged each other to see who would be the first to end chronic veteran homelessness in their city. Phoenix declared victory, and so I think the White House saw this as a good way to help bring local government more fully into this federal effort. Next slide, please. Quite a few California mayors have signed on as of a few days ago. That included West Hollywood, San Jose, San Francisco, San Diego, Sacramento, Riverside, Oakland, and Long Beach, Livermore, Fresno, Fremont, Encinitas, Del Mar, Carlsbad, and Bakersfield. So I'm sure these mayors all hope that them signing on will also attract more federal resources to the effort. I know that was a concern of Mayor Lee's before he signed on. We'll see how these work. Next slide, please. So, further unmet needs, women and families. As you probably are aware if you're providing service to this population, the vast majority of female veterans do not use VA healthcare services. They aren't aware of state and federal benefits and services available to them, and many are accessing services from community systems of care. Many female veterans do not identify as veterans, especially among the homeless population. It's historically been an issue. And there's a shortage of gender-specific and women veteran-specific housing, and there are some legal reasons for that. The fair housing, et cetera. You can't really create a gender-specific housing program and dedicate. You can give a preference, but you can't exclude others. But they are challenged to find adequate housing for the entire family. At present, a veteran with a family moving into grant per diem, unless there's other funding associated with it, cannot live with their family in that transitional setting. I don't think that's true for the transition in place. But so it's a challenge, an ongoing challenge, and I guess everybody's hoping that the SSVF program has a large, significant impact on these issues. Next slide, please. So thank you. We'll open it up now I'll turn it back over to Kelly, and we'll open it up for questions, and I hope this has been helpful.
Leon, thank you so much. That was jam-packed with information about all the latest initiatives and kind of the true status from your expert experience and expertise in that. We did have a couple of questions come through. The first one had to do with removing some of the barriers to immediate housing. And the question was, obviously the thought is more homeless will be better served by removing clean and sober barriers to the housing programs. Is there an estimated percentage increase of those who will be served by removing those barriers, or do we just know that it will improve and increase?
Well, I don't think that, if there are estimates, perhaps the National Center on Veteran Homelessness might have those. We at SWORDS have been lowering our barriers for quite some time, being more tolerant of relapse. For example, where many traditional grant per diem programs, that would be grounds for immediate discharge back into homelessness. Right. We work hard to avoid those situations when we can, but one of the regulations of the grant per diem program is that it needs to be a clean and sober environment. So that creates a bit of a challenge in some cases. So we
I wonder if we lost Leon.
But we are quite tolerant. Also, more recently, the VA has funded a number of safe haven programs. We just opened one in San Francisco, which is a very low barrier transitional housing program targeted for up to 6 months. The VA also has healthcare for homeless vets programs throughout. They also have lower barrier. Those are more targeted to mental health. The safe haven is more to dually diagnosed veterans. They do not have to commit to staying clean and sober. They can't use on site, but there aren't any drug testing going on, that sort of thing. They're very highly services enriched, lots of staff, but that's the latest that the VA has done.
Thank you. The other question had to do with VASH, the registry tool for the 25 Cities Challenge. And is there a way to involve a community or use that registry tool for the 25 Cities Challenge in another community if it's not one formally part of the 25 Cities initiative?
Absolutely. The VASH is free. You can fund it online. Org Code Consulting is the one that developed it. It's tested. It was rigorously tested and found to be valid. And so anyone can use that and can certainly set up their own registry. One of the issues is allowing everybody to talk about the veteran. So the VA has developed a release of information where a specific group, for example, in San Francisco, the group is called Homes for Heroes San Francisco. So if a veteran signs a release of information for that, we can jointly work on meeting her or his needs in housing and other areas. So it can certainly happen. A very good resource would be to contact Community Solutions. They piloted the very successful 100,000 Homes campaign. They've been very much involved in the 25 Cities initiative, and I'm sure they'll be very helpful to anybody who wants to contact them and talk about how they can best utilize these measures in their communities.
That's excellent. Thank you. All right. Well, that, I think, was the last question that we had. Oh, I beg your pardon. There's another question. How do we overcome the actual lack of housing, or excuse me, the lack of actual housing in our community?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. So the Prop 41 money that we talked about is an avenue, certainly. But it is a huge challenge in many communities in California. San Francisco, for example, has some of the highest housing costs in the country. And so it's a challenge. So, for example, in San Francisco, what we're doing, unfortunately, but it's what we're forced to do, is putting vets both with HUD-VASH and with other housing subsidies into the better single-room occupancy settings, where they don't have their own kitchen, and sometimes they don't even have their own bathroom. Now, we all want much more for them, but that is the only housing that's really available, except for the rare opening on the waiting list for deeply affordable housing elsewhere. So you have to be creative. The city is very much behind this. We're rehabbing single-room occupancy buildings here so that they're in good shape, that they're run effectively, and with the veterans in mind. But we all want more for them than an SRO unit. But that's what we're forced to do here. We'll never get there if we don't. So it's a challenge, but it takes getting together with your local Department of Housing, whether it's at the city or county level, and try to figure it out. Try and leverage the federal resources that are available to make that happen. For example, there's a project that we're in very preliminary talks about here in San Francisco, where they have 75% of the financing lined up for it. With the advent of the Prop 41 money, they found a very possible and probable source for that missing 25%. So that gives the impetus for that housing to go be developed specifically for veterans. So you have to really work with your create local partners and try and figure it out, but it's a tough one. We also work with are working with the stakeholder process with the Prop 41 with the state on making sure that some of this money is targeted for rural areas. where traditional means of financing such as tax credits for larger projects may not be feasible. So rural areas have their own specific challenges in that regard.
I can imagine. I think that answered that question. We do have another one. Would the Housing First initiative be conflicting with the safety of families with children, and is there a platform to handle potential veterans with substance abuse problems with children?
Well, that is a big question, and it's still a matter of, is the family better off living on the street or in their car with a substance abusing adult, or are they better off engaged in housing where the children can receive services, get in school, whatever, have case management services available while the VA or others work with that veteran to get them hopefully voluntarily into treatment. And beyond that, as we know, there's child protective services and that sort of thing. But the research and history has shown that once you get somebody housed, the stress lessens, and it's much easier to address substance abuse issues because they're not as much of a coping mechanism as they were. In fact, with chronic inebriates, if you put them into permanent housing, their drinking, it reduces almost immediately by 30%. So housing is health care. Housing is an intervention. And so that's why Housing First is so important. Hope that answered the question.
That's a great answer. I'm just typing the response out now, and I really like the soundbite of housing is healthcare.
Yes.
So the last question we had is that are copies of the presentation available? And yes, we will absolutely not only make the slides available, but also this entire presentation is being recorded and will be posted up on Swords to Plowshares website probably in the next 48 hours. With the questions, the answers, the conversations, the audio, and all. So please check back for that. And if you have any other specific questions, now's the time to get them in. And if you think of something after we finish today, please don't hesitate to send us a question at webinars@swordstoplowshares.org. That's swords, or you could just send it to webinars@stp-sf.org. So with that, if there are no other further questions, we'd like to thank you, Leon, Winston, and you, our listeners. Please note that each of you will receive an email with a web link to evaluate this presentation, and your feedback is very important to us and greatly appreciated. Thanks again for your time. This concludes our webinar, and you may now disconnect.